Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be speaking a little bit extemporaneously this evening because I'm trying to wrap it up relatively quickly. So I got stuff that I have to do this evening, so just bear with me. Tonight we are going to dunk on the Biden administration because they so richly deserve it. There are multiple reasons for this, and I'm going to walk you through the most recent three of them. We're going to talk a little bit about deprogramming after college, and we're going to discuss one of the leading causes of death in Canada, and we're going to reiterate how important it is to value life and to remember that you will die, hopefully naturally in the proper time, in the natural order of things. But I have really amusing news to share with you guys today, so I'm going to start with this. I'm going to read you the headline. We're going to look at a little bit of the article, and then you guys can just draw your own conclusions as to what on earth is even going on right here. So this is the headline. Non-binary Biden nuclear official charged with stealing woman's luggage at airport. So this sounds a lot less serious than it actually is turning out to be. This apparently is a felony, and Sam faces possibly 5 years or $10,000 in fines if he's convicted. Yep, 5 years in prison, $10,000 fine, allegedly taking another person's luggage. I'm not convinced thoroughly that it was alleged because the police went back and they looked at the footage. They watched Sam get off the plane, pick up this lady's luggage, and stow it in a different bag, and then dumped all her clothes and used the bag for like a month or something after the fact. So this is just really I have felt for quite a while incredibly discombobulated by the Biden administration because it genuinely seems like no one is in charge and no one knows which way this car is driving. And it makes me uncomfortable. I remember when I was little, there was a point at which there was only so much chaos I could stand. I had 5 siblings. You guys know this, I think, about me. A lot of siblings. Mom sometimes would leave home. Once my older sister was, I think, 12, that was the age that my parents decided that it was safe to leave the kids at home with a big sibling. When the big sibling was 12, one or more of us was. So she would, but my older sister, she was a little more than a year older than I was, so she didn't really have a super firm grasp on, authority and discipline and keeping kids in line or whatever. I would get really nervous when things would hit a critical peak of chaos, and I was like, oh my gosh, is the house gonna burn down? What's gonna happen now? I feel like no one is in charge of this, and I wish mom and dad would come back because at least then I know there's gonna be some kind of stable order that I can kind of, know what to expect. And I think that's a basic request that every citizen should be able to make of their administration. I think that's a serious responsibility of whoever is in charge of the presidency, is to just make people feel as if someone is in charge and things are going the way they're ostensibly supposed to be going. Like we are supposed to be seeing the presence of the adults back in the room, and this is not what this looks like. As a side note, I just noticed that Sam Brinton is speaking for the Trevor Project, which is their byline is, quote, saving young LGBTQ lives. The Trevor Project is directly funded by the maker of Lupron, which is used to chemically sterilize young children as a puberty blocker. By all means, check it out. I think it was the Columbia Bugle that did a column on this. Really interesting conversation, definitely worth investigating. The Trevor Project is allied with the White House, and they are fully in the basket for puberty blockers, which is just something that you guys should know. But anyway, I digress on that point. Let's look at some of the foreign policy choices that the Biden administration has been making lately, and this is from AG Hamilton 29 on Twitter. It says, yikes at this take. According to Boot, that is Max Boot, the only thing that was keeping Biden from openly supporting left-wing dictators in Latin and South America was the possibility of winning Florida. So let's see what Max Boot has to say. He is never not entertaining. If you guys don't follow him on Twitter, you should at least certainly check him out. He always has a spicy take or two. They're rarely correct, but it's a good time. Biden, with no hope of winning Florida in 2024 after the midterm wipeout, is now free to pursue more pragmatic policies toward Cuba and Venezuela rather than catering to politically potent constituencies of conservative Cuban and Venezuelan Americans. Holy moly. Like, we know that to some degree this is what politics is. But at the same time, you don't really just come out and say it. I don't like this mask off moment. This is more of the same, making me feel like no one knows who's driving this car, because in a properly ordered political machine, this would never be said. This would never be passed around at the White House, even probably behind closed doors. It would simply be an understanding, and you'd move from that point. This is just mind-boggling to me, because it just speaks to the deep partisanship that the adults in the room have brought back to the presidency. Let's look at this last foreign policy win for the Biden administration, which is, I think you guys have probably all seen this statement in passing over the last couple days. It's not brand new, but Natasha Bertrand is talking about it, and she says a new White House statement on the protests in China. Quote, "We've long said everyone has the right to peacefully protest here in the United States and around the world." Okay, fact check, incorrect. And then they go on, this includes in the PRC. A national security spokesperson says, here's their full statement. "We've said that zero COVID is not a policy we pursuing here in the United States." And I would like to point out that this is not copy-edited in any way. It's supposed to say, not a policy we are pursuing here in the United States. It says, COVID is not a policy I can't even say it. I can't even read it. It hurts my brain too much. Zero COVID is not a policy we pursuing here in the United States. So let's continue. That's already not a strong start. They should be saying unequivocally that they stand with the protesters who just want freedom to associate and freedom to speak, but they're not saying that. Again, more politics, I understand, but you need to come up with a better way to convey that, yes, you care about the freedoms of these people, you care about their lives, and you want them to live in as much freedom as humanly possible, because we are actually America. But that's not what they're saying here. And as we've said, we think it's going to be very difficult for the People's Republic of China to be able to contain this virus through their zero COVID strategy. For us, we are focused on what works, and that means using the public health tools like continuing to enhance vaccination rates, including boosters, and making testing and treatment easily accessible. We've long said everyone has the right to peacefully protest here in the US and around the world. This includes the PRC. Wow, 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 wow. This is the weakest statement I think I've seen from any administration. And I know I'm not that old, and I know I've only been on Twitter watching this stuff really closely for a relatively short part of my life. But holy moly, this is just, they don't care about the people in China. This looks to me like they literally only care what the CCP thinks. I couldn't figure out the acronym for PCC. I have such a hard time with acronyms, you guys. I end up misspelling acronyms to a degree that I never would have thought possible until I started trying to communicate with people. This is part of the reason I used to promise a typo in every tweet, because it's no joke. And when I started to lose my vision to MS, that was the first symptom that I had MS. I started to get all of these typos in my thumbnails I was making for Timcast IRL, and I was like, what is going on? How did I miss this? So that certainly has not helped. That's why I wear glasses all the time now. It's very much non-negotiable, even though I've got that partly under control right now. Anyway, I digress. The Biden administration is not being strong on China. They're being very friendly and welcoming to dictators in South America and Latin America. And it's just, the whole thing appears to be just crumbling from the inside. And I don't know what to make of that, because I know there are political enemies, but for the sake of our country, we need the rest of the world to look at us and say, hey, you know what? They really got something there. What they have to say really matters. It's very much the art of diplomacy, is having these tools that you can use that you never do. Simply the threat of their existence is enough to persuade your enemies to go along with what you want them to do. I can't imagine that anyone right now is taking the U.S. seriously. And this puts me back in mind of when people used to talk about Donald Trump embarrassing the U.S. No, this has nothing on, that was nothing on this. This is dangerous territory. When Angela Merkel laughed at Donald Trump and he threw Starburst at her and said, don't never say I don't give you anything. That was hilarious. Okay. Russia viewed Trump as a madman. Nobody knew what he was going to do. It was the perfect perfect. Strangely enough, it was the right balance of diplomacy when it came down to like keeping people kind of unsure what you're going to do. Like North Korea didn't know what to expect from him. He made great inroads with North Korea when he was in office. But this is just such weak sauce. And it's so frustrating to watch this happen because you know that China has our worst interests at heart. We know this. They view us as their enemies, 100%. I personally am 100% on the side of the Chinese people. I know that this protest and whatnot started at the Foxconn laboratories. I forget in what city, and I would not even dare to try to pronounce it. But I know that that's where those Apple things are made, and they're offering people a bonus to return of like $4.20 an hour or something crazy like that. And I'm just like, I hope that every single one of these people quit. I hope that they completely upset the Foxconn production in China. And I genuinely hope that what these people are protesting over is what ultimately upends the CCP. And I don't really care if YouTube decides to demonetize me for saying that, because I remember when we came out with a China video about some of the prisoners who were being forced into these camps, YouTube chose to demonetize that and downrank it because it was too spicy for them, or because they're in bed with China. It's very, very difficult to flesh out exactly where all China has its tendrils. In the US, we know they were in US universities, which is going to be my segue to my next thing. But we know that they're everywhere. And we know that Biden is soft on China. We know that Hunter has all these different connections that could easily be used as blackmail. And it's such a mess. It's incredibly discouraging. And I don't know what to say as far as presidential politics, except that your ultimate goal shouldn't be to change the path of federal politics. That's not the way forward. That's not going to do anything except exhaust us and make us feel completely powerless. So I don't think that's the way to go. I think what we should do instead is, because I mentioned the universities in relation to China a little bit ago, I'm going to talk about higher education now. Andy and I kind of go back and forth about higher education because he believes in the truest form of higher education, which is where you can actually set aside time to study some of these super important things. I completely understand how important that is, but I'm very stubborn too, and I push back, and I'm like, look at the way it is now. Like, I could never defend this. This is crazy to me. Let's read this article. Manhattan pharma heiress says her mom had to hire $300 a day deprogrammer to help her unlearn crazed woke views after she was brainwashed while attending the elite Mount Holyoke College. Annabelle Rockwell, wow, what a rich girl name, 29, graduated from Mount Holyoke in Western Massachusetts in 2015. She said it drove her to drink and made her briefly become estranged from her mother, who threw a vase during one of their arguments. Wow, this was not good. Prior to attending the elite school, which charges $60,000 a year, Rockwell said she grew up in a traditional and open-minded household. That's all anybody can hope for, honestly. While attending the school, she became indoctrinated and was taught she was an oppressed victim of the patriarchy. Her mom hired a $300 a day deprogrammer to help her daughter, which Rockwell credits for getting her back on her feet. I just went down this deep rabbit hole, she said. If it wasn't for her, I'd probably be living in Massachusetts and I'd be miserable. Oh my gosh. That is a horrifying story, and I am afraid of what happens to the people who can't afford a deprogrammer. I feel like that maybe Jordan Peterson and James Lindsay should come up with some kind of curriculum to focus on bringing people back from the edge after they've been in these higher education institutions, because I think we're going to start seeing more and more of this. Because if they're not non-functional, if they're not driven to alcoholism, then they're just out there in the world being incredibly miserable and making other people's lives miserable too. Oh, you can see that I was shopping for cat towers. There you go. We're shopping for cat towers. It's going to be Dip's gift for Christmas. Anyway, I distracted myself. A Manhattan pharma heiress said her mother had to hire a $300 a day deprogrammer to unlearn the woke views she was brainwashed with at an all-women's Massachusetts college. Annabella Rockwell, 29, graduated from Mount Holyoke in Western Massachusetts in 2015, said it drove her to drink, made her briefly become estranged from her mother, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is pretty much how I like the Daily Mail, because they open every article with like a brief rundown of all the points that they put into it, and it's a really good, concise way of seeing what they're getting at. This just went down this deep rabbit hole. I saw everything through the lens of oppression and bias and victimhood. I came to school as someone who saw everyone equally. I left looking for injustice wherever I could and automatically assuming that all white men were sexist. It looks to me in this picture, I don't know if you guys can see this, but doesn't it look like she's wearing a PragerU t-shirt? That's so interesting. Honestly, I need to learn more about her and see where she ended up. Let's see if they say anything about that. In this article, she said her professors encouraged alienation from parents and even offered their homes to stay in. Wow, so this is something teachers do even to much younger kids than this. They talk about how your parents will never understand, but I'm here for you. And for those younger kids, it's typically along the lines of gender, whereas when you're older, like this girl was, that it'll be along the lines of feminism, which I'm sure is something that's very prevalent at Mount Holyoke. She's very lucky she escaped, and I'm glad that she's doing better. They'd say, yeah, don't go home, come stay with us for the holiday. Most of my classmates believed all this stuff too. If you didn't, you are ostracized. Wow. In addition to the alleged brainwashing, she said she found the freshman rituals aggressive and the drinking culture was massive on campus. Yeah, I can imagine. Everyone's unhappy, and of course they're going to be drinking. That's so sad. Some freshmen even cut their hair into the moho chop, which is a radical assertion of the LGBT identities for some, and others just an initiation ritual, according to the campus newspaper, the Mount Holyoke News. This is crazy, man. This is just, I am troubled by this. Oh, she did end up meeting Donald Trump. She now works for a conservative company after briefly working on Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. She said she started questioning Democratic values after moving home to Florida in 2018. How interesting that she ended up in Florida, too. That's really where most people go to get sane, believe it or not, from all the stories we know about Florida man. I just wanted to touch on that because that's the kind of story that really kind of makes me sad. And that's the theme we're going to be rolling with through the end of this video. Because I can't help but leave you guys a little bit depressed, even though technically this is supposed to be Good News Tuesday. We have one more thing to look at. And I think that you guys have probably seen this before. It's very sad. A little bit of trigger warning. It's kind of heartbreaking. It's very upsetting. It's made by a company that's trying to make money off the fact that a woman committed medically assisted suicide, which is just basically the most horrible form of capitalism, honestly, that I can imagine. But let's hear what they have to say. I'm going to try to make sure that you guys can hear this.
Last breaths are sacred.
Oh, it's tiny. I'm sorry.
My final days, I see bubbles. I see the ocean. I see music. Even now, as I seek help to end my life, there is still so much beauty. You just have to be brave enough to see it.
Well, we have really broken our tradition of Good News Tuesdays because this is just crushing. It's so sad. I have such a hard time with this because this woman, I guess she had Ehlers-Danlos. I don't even know how to pronounce that, but it's like a connective tissue disorder that causes a lot of pain anywhere you have connective tissue, which is pretty much everywhere in your body. So I'm not unsympathetic to that level of pain. I really wish that instead of just telling people that they should take the easy way out, not to put too fine a point on it, I wish that we were developing pain medicine that were not addictive, that didn't have serious side effects. I wish that we were teaching people concepts like meditation, and breathing exercises and ways to control their physical symptoms that are not so dangerous. But I suspect what is happening in Canada, and this is why I suspect this, because of this Daily Caller article, euthanasia is now a leading cause of death in Canada, is because Canada has socialized medicine. And I will tell you that it is much less expensive to offer someone assisted suicide than it is to try to fix everything that's wrong with them. And when you have a limited amount of time, when you have limited resources, when I was reading a thread from a woman who had to take her little baby to the emergency room in Canada, and she had a long thread about all of the complaints she had and how much she was worried about her child. But she still came out and said, all of you people who are making right-wing talking points off of this, just get in the garbage. That was literally her statement. She was like, get in the bin, which is like, really? Really, you're really going to fight with people who want to create a better system for you and your kids so that you don't have to do that again. And it's just such a stifling partisanship that you can see with this, especially with that mother. That was deeply disturbing because Canada has some seriously big issues with actually administering medicine to its people. And that should never be the case anywhere. For you can disagree on everything else, but we can all agree that everybody should have the opportunity to get healthcare at a reasonable price when they need it. You can disagree on whether it should be socialized, whether you should try to make it free, whether you should do some kind of strange mix between capitalism and socialized medicine like we do in the US, which doesn't work very well. And you could talk about stuff like insurance and pharma companies. But at the end of the day, we all agree that everyone should have access to good healthcare because we care about human life. And I suspect what's going on in Canada is not even so much that they don't have the funds to solve these problems. Canada is such an ESG oriented and such an environmentally friendly country. It would not, I will say this as a conspiracy theorist at this point, it would not surprise me if Canada found it to be more expeditious to offer MAID, M-A-I-D, medical assistance in dying, to its citizens as a way to reduce the country's carbon footprint. And you guys may mark my word. I make a lot of predictions like this. Some of them come true, some of them don't. I wouldn't be surprised if it came out, or I don't know if you guys recall, but recently they just had a deputy minister come out and say it was good that Canadians were paying as much for gas as they were, because it would remind them of how important, the push for green energy was and how pivotal the climate crisis was. And I was just floored by that. And honestly, I don't know if you guys remember Chrystia Freeland, but during the trucker protests, she was just like, oh yeah, we're just going to shut down their bank accounts. You don't get to protest in this first world country. You just don't get to. You don't get that freedom of speech. And if you disagree with us, you're categorically wrong. We will track you down. We will figure out who you are, and we will make your lives basically impossible, because once you remove someone's ability to bank, you make everything difficult for them. But this is a very depressing note to end on, and I want to say that I hope that the takeaway with this is just to focus on how valuable human life actually is. And that's going to require us to recognize that people are inherently valuable. Now, they're not inherently good, but they are inherently valuable, and especially, and this is why I'm pro-life, especially before they're born, when they've literally done nothing wrong, they've harmed no one, they exist through no fault of their own in a place that is no fault of their own. And for this reason, I highly value human life, even when there's a great deal of pain or uncertainty, or if there's not enough money, or if people feel just absolutely hopeless or have all kinds of mental issues that are driving them to make the Canadian choice. I'm just going to start calling it that, because they're not really at home to saying like medical assistance in dying on YouTube. We're going to call it the Canadian way from here on forward, just so you guys know. That'll be our little secret. I think that to restructure the way that our governments view human life, it's going to take such a very long time to make these positive changes, because we have to change what individuals think about human life. And there's no way to do that without communities. There's no way to do that without strong churches. And it makes it hard to almost even know where to start. But I would say that the family is probably one of the best places to start. And the Biden administration would not have you believe that. But that lady, the Manhattan heiress who was deprogrammed, would definitely agree with my analysis, I think. I kind of wish I could talk to her for sure and see what she thinks of all this stuff. But we need to bolster the family in a way that we never have before. And I hope that any of you guys who have kids are taking the time to talk to them and make sure that you're on the same page. Make it so that they feel they can trust you. Make it so they understand that you are on the same team and that you really do want what's best for them, even when it doesn't feel like that to them. I hope that you guys are finding ways to protect your families against this stuff. If you have new kids, goodness, I know how stressful it is. I talk to people my parents' age and my husband's parents' age, and they all say, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I would do in this current iteration of culture if I were raising kids now. So honestly, as far as I'm concerned, these are the hard times that make strong men. I hold that out for my kids whenever we have them and say that they are going to be very, very strong in ways that I never would have even dreamed I needed to be. I suspect that their whole understanding of the US will be completely different, and that's okay. I'm going to teach them that their perspective is the one thing they control and that they can change it whenever it's necessary. And hopefully, this will turn them into the strong humans that make good times again. That's really been my conclusion with all of this. It's just going to take so much time that I don't know if we're going to be able to fix it all in my lifetime. I'm very grateful I live in the US and hopefully I can help kind of sustain it through whatever is coming next. But I really think it's going to come down to our kids. If you don't have kids, if you're on the fence about it, I hope that you find the right person and that you do end up having children because it's going to be so important for the future. It really is the future. There is no future without kids, no matter what the green climate movement tells you. So I'll leave you guys on that note because it is a little bit more positive. This was just a little bit depressing toward the end there. So my apologies on that front, but I wanted you guys to know about it and kind of hopefully take a slightly more positive view from it. But anyway, I'm going to go run some errands. I'm going to go pick up my wallet from a lovely lady who retrieved it for me. I was so grateful. She emailed me. I was like, how did you find my email? She's like, I've been trying to figure out how to get in touch with you since Sunday when I found this. I just finally went to, social media or whatever. And I was like, oh boy, she knows exactly what I think. And so I'm kind of curious. I think we're going to meet her in person this evening when we go to pick this up. So this could be interesting, but I have to do that now. So have fun this evening and I will see all of you guys tomorrow. Until then, bye guys.